All right, welcome back everybody to conversation number 69 on the Test and Learn community. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. First, as always, our original sponsor, Conductrix. So thank you everybody at Conductrix, Matt and Nate and Ezekiel. Thank you for being our first sponsor. Ronnie Coffey, thank you for being our sponsor, and our new sponsor, EPO. They're 3 months in now for sponsoring our newsletter. We really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Now we want to welcome Dale Bertrand. This is your first time on the TLC, and Dale is going to be talking to us about SEO and content, but I want to introduce Dale. I had the lovely opportunity to hear Dale speak at Marketing Analytics Summit, and it was an amazing event, and he sort of opened my mind to some of the amazing possibilities of AI. I have adult sons that are in college, and they're in two different, one of my sons is in two different universities at the same time because he couldn't make up his mind. And those universities are taking two very different approaches with AI. One university says, you cannot use AI and we'll know if you do it. And the other university said, we want you to use AI. We want you to embrace it. And we want you to show your work. And he used that university. He ended up deciding to go with that university because he saw that university was going to make his life better. And your talk, I actually took your slides and showed your talk, and especially the stuff you showed about MIM AI and how it sort of unlocked the possibilities of your brain and the extension of your brain, and brought it to him, and he took it to his professor, and they're actually using it in their class now, and they're all doing this big project with MIM AI. So I just wanted you to know how much it influenced his entire university and what they're doing there, because it was such a big influence on me and now an entire university. So pretty cool. I'm really impressed, and I'm looking forward to now you getting to open a bunch of brains here with us at the TLC. So you all are going to be really excited by Dale. He is probably one of the smartest people I've had the opportunity to meet, and I'm really excited for you all to get to meet him as well. So Dale, I'm going to pass the screen share over to you and let you open up a bunch of brains.
All right, well, awesome. It's an amazing introduction. And it sounds like I have a career after I retire from my current career in teaching at colleges or something. I hadn't, I work with business owners, marketers, business marketing leaders. Didn't think about working with students. So I'll have to figure that out.
Absolutely.
And one thing for those of you who are live on today's webinar, I'd love to know what you're doing with AI now, if you could put that in the chat. So like any tool that you're using, what you're using it for, just to kind of level set where you guys are at with AI. And I'm going to move forward so that we get everything in the time that we have. So thank you for the wonderful introduction. I do have an intro slide, but we don't need it because of the introduction that I had. So my name is Dale Bertrand. I have a background in technology. I studied engineering undergrad. I studied AI in grad school. That's how I got into it. I got my name on some academic papers. I've been following it ever since. I did my first conference talk 2 years ago before ChatGPT on AI. And I've been just doing so many workshops and conference presentations now that AI is a huge thing. When I was working as an engineer, the highlight of my career was building a supercomputer for the NSA. So that's a story best told over a beer when we meet in person. And I run an agency, Fire and Spark. We do only SEO strategy, and we've worked with a bunch of clients, some of which you may have heard of. But moving on here, and I'm adjusting my screens here a little bit. But moving on here, I really like to point out that AI is something that we've all been using for a long time. We've been using it on our phones. We have Siri, we have Alexa. Google's BERT, I think, is really interesting. Before Google released BERT, the way we used to use Google was we would type keywords into Google, and Google would find those words on pages online and show us those pages. And that's basically what Google did. On the left here, so you can see somebody typing in math practice books for adults. And the page that comes up, the reason why this page came up is because these words are on the page and in the title. That's how Google used to work. Some of us who do SEO may have noticed when Google released BERT.
Hey, Dale, you're not projecting. You probably want to share the screen.
I lost it. Okay, let me try again. File. So that is different. Okay, let me share.
You said on the left.
There you go.
I can see was Kelly.
Okay, so now it's working for real. Thank you for letting me know. This is Google's BERT, and what it is it was a large language model they started using 3 or 4 years ago. Though everybody uses Google, but we may not have noticed that they were using this particular AI behind the searches. The old version of Google, what it did when you typed in math practice books for adults, is it would look for those words on pages and show you those pages. What the new Google does, and it's been doing this for several years using BERT, is it will try to understand what you mean. What are you really looking for? What does it mean to have a math practice book for an adult? And because of that, the page you can see that it's showing here over to the right is math for grown-ups, which is basically it understanding what you're looking for and giving you the best page out there that can help an adult or a grown-up study math, as opposed to just looking for those words on pages. And this is an example of AI that we've all been using for 3-4 years now, and without really understanding exactly how it helps Google to deliver much, much better results for us. So we're gonna, when we're talking about AI, like we've all heard of ChatGPT. I'm assuming when I look at the chat that you guys have all tried using ChatGPT. Like it was just like a game changer in the AI field because it got so many people talking about AI and using AI. And ChatGPT is generative AI, as we know. We often think about ChatGPT as a tool that can generate blog posts for us, or short form content or something. It doesn't do a very good job generating blog posts, but that's the way people think about it. I want to give one example of predictive AI using Google again to help people really understand the difference. Predictive AI is all about predicting the future, or predicting what links people are going to click on, or the best ad to show somebody, or the right time to send an email. That's the type of AI that I've worked on for a long time, until the craze around generative AI. But let me give you one example just to show the difference. If you think about predictive AI, like what I always think about is Google search results page. And you guys might accuse me of being an SEO guy, and that's why this is an example, but it's true, I am an SEO guy. When I type in traditional IRA, what Google's doing behind the scenes is, number one, it's using BERT up front to just understand the query. So what is Dale really looking for? And then after it understands what I'm really looking for, it's got a bunch of pages and it's going to try to predict what I'm going to click on. Because Google wants to get it right. Google wants to give me the answer I'm looking for. And for the most part, they measure that based on, do I click on the things that it's showing me, or what do I click on so it can learn better what I was actually looking for? So that's a good example of predictive AI, Google predicting what I'm looking for based on the search result and everything else that Google knows about me. But then there's generative AI, like something like ChatGPT. I happen to have a ChatGPT Plus account, so have access to like DALL-E and all of that good stuff. But with generative AI, I mean, there's platforms out there now that are generating text, generating images, generating video, generating audio. Like it's really getting out of control. There's just going to be a lot of it out there. And this is how we think about like generative and predictive AI. But I want to go deeper into generative AI and really talk about large language models. The reason why I think this is important is because, like I said, when I talk to marketers, they typically think about ChatGPT as, oh, it can generate text, it can generate a blog article for me. But it's actually much more useful if you think about it as a tool for natural language processing. And I'll show you what I mean there. So one of the things that large language models like ChatGPT and BARD are really good at is understanding. They can understand natural language. And this is super important when they're being trained, because they're reading everything on the web and they're learning, but also they need to understand the prompt. They need to understand what they're outputting. And the consequence of this, like thinking about large language models is like being really good at understanding natural language, is that you'll start to realize that you can use large language models like ChatGPT for any task that requires natural language understanding. So if I wanted to look at a bunch of blog articles and summarize them, or I wanted to look at a bunch of conferences online that I might want to attend and tell me which ones have sessions about a particular software that I want to, or technique that I want to understand. These are all natural language understanding problems. Anything I'm doing with my email is a natural language understanding problem. And we are surrounded just like in these types of problems. And the second type of thing that large language models are good at is reasoning. And they reason based on pattern recognition. All of the different patterns that they learned when they were being trained and they're reading everything online on the web. Now, you guys are all muted, but I'm still going to ask you this question. If I were to ask you 1 + 1 equals, what would you say next? Anybody feel free. I heard somebody mouth 2. But the question I would ask you is, yes, we're all going to come up with the answer 2. But did you just do math? That's my question for you. I see a couple people nodding no. And what you really did was you completed a pattern. And if you ask ChatGPT or Bard 1 + 1 and then hit go, it's going to say 2, but it didn't just do math. It just recognized the pattern. So the type of reasoning that these large language models are good at are reasoning that they can perform based on the patterns that they've learned online. Now, when they're reading, millions, billions of pages online to recognize patterns, they're recognizing patterns that we as humans don't really understand. This is how the bias gets into these models. This is how they learn a lot. So there's millions of patterns out there that we wouldn't be able to name, we wouldn't be able to understand. But they can do reasoning to figure things out. Like I want to write a blog article. Give me a 5-step process for getting that done, and they can reason their way to the answer. The third thing that large language models can do that's really useful is they can compose outputs. Now, if you went to ChatGPT and you said, write me a blog post, it's going to give you a text output in English that's about the length of a blog post. But there are many other types of useful outputs you can ask it for. You could ask it to write code. You can ask it to write, to build a spreadsheet, build a table. You can have the output in various human languages, various machine languages. I typically ask it to give me like markdown code that I can easily turn into HTML. There's just so much you can do in terms of specifying the type of output that you want. And in my mind, that's just another vector that makes the large language model so useful for a variety of different tasks. So, thinking about natural language understanding and then reasoning and composing outputs, I'm going to give you guys an example. One example is I might go to a large language model and say, write me a meta description for a solid wood coastal Wayfair table in 55 characters or less. It needs to understand my prompt in order to do what it's doing. And what it'll do behind the scenes is it'll read that prompt, use its transformer technology to transform it into its internal understanding of what I just asked it to do, and they call that embeddings. And that's basically what it's doing. It's understanding the prompt. Then from there, it needs to do some reasoning. So it's taking its understanding internally of what I asked it to do, and it's transforming it into, okay, Dale wants an SEO meta title. Here's some characteristics of it. It's going to be a Wayfair product, and it's going to be 55 characters or less. I think I understand it. And then it'll eventually get to the answer, which is, okay, I'm going to output something that's like coastal solid wood dining room Wayfair, but it still hasn't created the output, the actual text. So now it can compose the output, and it'll give us exactly what we expect, which is coastal, solid wood, dining table, by Wayfair, something like that. Oh, sorry, right here. Coastal, solid wood dining room table, by Wayfair. So there's so many permutations of this in terms of us giving it different instructions in the prompt or asking it to do a different type of reasoning to get to the result. Maybe it needs to use a spreadsheet that we've given it. And then in terms of composing the output, I just had it give me the meta title, but I could have it give me a spreadsheet of meta titles. I could have it write the same meta title in 11 different languages. There's just so much that I could have the large language model do. So moving on, in my presentation, when you guys get this presentation, I have a bunch of these try this slides, and this is the very first one. So this is really about asking ChatGPT or Bard, how can you help me with the task that you're working on? In this case, I was working with, we have a client in the pet space. So we asked them, how can you help me do research on static correction for dog training? Another permutation of this task, and what I like to do when I have like my 2 or 3 hour workshop on this topic, is I tell people to take your task list for the day. You might have 5 or 10 things you're planning to do today. Give it to ChatGPT in the morning and say, how can you help me with these 10 tasks? And you will be surprised that some of the things it comes up with are actually useful. I think user interfaces are important. Like if you think about it, like I've been working with AI for a very long time, back to 1997, 96 actually. And the reason why very few people were using it is because you had to be a programmer to use these systems, to build, to use the libraries that were available. ChatGPT represents a user interface that's a lot easier to use, which is why it got so popular. But you still have this kind of empty prompt problem. The first time I had this empty prompt problem was when the very first time that I used the internet back in high school. It's a very, very long time ago. But I logged into a Unix account and I had no idea what a Unix command was. But I had this kind of empty prompt problem. But we're still having that problem. And this is Bing chat. We still have that problem today where we don't know exactly what to ask for. Now I'm gonna, in a few slides later, I'm gonna show you guys how I write prompts, but it's important to understand that AI is going to be embedded into all the software that we're already using. Like you might already be using HubSpot or some analytical tool or Excel. So it's important to learn it, but we're going to have it embedded in the tools we're already using. And the interfaces are going to improve. I'm going to give you some examples. Here's one interface where you can use AI to generate an image, like an image of a lion over here on the left. And then what you can do is you can click and drop control points on the image. In this case, the red dots are the control points. And then you can move the red dot on the top up to the blue dot, and then move the red dot on the bottom down to the blue dot on the bottom. And what you're doing is you're communicating to the AI, generative AI in this case, that what you really wanted was the lion's mouth to be open. So the point is, instead of that text him, no, I wanted the mouth to be open, you can kind of manipulate images and give it clues. So that's one interface. This is the same interface, but an example of, no, I wanted the mountain to be higher. So you can literally just like drag the control points up and press a button to regenerate. I like this tool, Word Crafter, that I use for SEO. What it does is you give it a keyword and it'll search for that keyword on Google, and it'll find the top 10 results on Google for that keyword. Then what it'll do is it'll read all the content on those 10 pages to understand what Google thinks people are looking for. So I use, and then you can write an article. It also helps you write an article. But the way that I use this tool is to help me understand the intent behind a keyword, because Google knows the intent behind a keyword, and Google is communicating to you what the intent is as a marketer by showing you on the page what it thinks people are looking for. And this does that in like 5 seconds without me having to actually do the work. I'm going to just play a video of another aspect of this tool, Word Crafter, that I love. And it is, oh, you can see it's moving now. But it's the fact that when it gives me an outline that represents the intent for that keyword, I can move it around. I can delete parts that I don't think are relevant to what I'm doing, and then press a button when you're done revising the outline to create the first version of like a blog post or something like that based on it. But I love the fact that you, in this particular tool, you can really easily revise the outline output and then press a button to move on to the next stage, which would be writing an article. But this is a tool that I happen to use. There's so many image generation tools out there. I like Ideogram because it's better than most at typography. And what I always want is, if I'm writing an article about SEO or content marketing or something, I want to generally, for example, here I wrote about backlinking and buying backlinks and why that doesn't always work. And I told it to generate an image that I would put at the top of my blog article. It generated a lot of them. I told it to use black, white, and orange because that's my company colors, my branding. So I happen to like these tools, but there's a lot of tools, and DALL-E and ChatGPT Plus is getting better at typography too, so that we might not use this so much anymore. But my next try this in my presentation here is to use a tool like Ideogram and try to get it to generate an image using your color scheme, your brand colors for whatever it is that you do. And then moving on, like I said, how we're going to use AI tools, they're going to be built into the tools that we already use. We've all seen a lot of these chatbot assistants. So think of ChatGPT or the custom GPTs, if you guys are familiar with that. But now anybody can create a custom GPT given your own data. Maybe it's a big, long guide that you wrote, and your custom GPT will be an expert on everything that's in that guide, everything that you give it. And then there's Microsoft's Copilots that you can also chat with. They live in all of Microsoft's tools in Excel. Now, separate from all of that, one thing that we do at my agency is we create what we would call like ideation spreadsheets. So these are spreadsheets that use the GPT function in Google Sheets to run prompts to do things. And I actually have an example of that in a few slides, but I'll show you. And then we use like straight up automation. So this is like Zapier or Python code, or it's make.com automations to do things that are just 100% automated. I'll give you an example of one of them. I have an automation that will look for sales conversations in my CRM that are lost deals that I lost 3 months ago or more. And it'll look at the emails that I exchanged with that sales contact and write a follow-up email, just a few lines, but something like, hey, back in November, we talked about SEO for this particular website. Is this a good time to reconnect? And that automation will just drop them in my drafts folder. And I'll wake up in the morning, see them in my drafts folder, revise them and send them, like that sort of thing. So we have a lot of those like automations at our agency for a lot of different things. So I'm going to talk about chatting with spreadsheets because for SEO, for content, it's like such a useful use case. If you have a ChatGPT Plus account, you have access to advanced data analytics. So I assume some of you have already used this, some of you haven't. It's a game changer when it comes to any work that you might do. Like if you've ever used a spreadsheet, you should be using this tool. If you use a spreadsheet ever in your job, you should be using this tool. But the example that I'm showing here, I won't go too deep into it, but I gave it a spreadsheet that I exported from Search Console that has some keyword data. And then I always like to ask the question, how can you help me analyze this data? Because it'll give you ideas that you haven't really thought of, but then I dive deep into whatever it is that I want. But I've used advanced data analytics in ChatGPT Plus with keyword data, Google and GA4 data to do things like where it's really, really helpful is when you have a lot of keywords. Maybe it's a big site, bigger than what you could wrap your head around on your own. And when I do SEO, one of the things I want to understand is for what themes is this website authoritative with Google? And for what keywords is it not really that authoritative for Google? So there's different ways to do it, but one way to do it would be to give it like a list of URLs on the website that are some are getting traffic from Google, some of them aren't. And then you have it infer what the theme is on that page by reading the URL. And then you can ask the AI to tell you what types of themes is this website doing well for in Google, and what types of themes is this website not doing well for Google? Because some of those pages will have a lot of traffic and rankings from Google in the spreadsheet. Some of those pages will have 0 traffic and rankings from Google in the spreadsheet. And what AI can do better than a human, better than me, is to look at all of that data at scale and then summarize an answer to that question. And what the words I usually use in the prompt is describe to me the types of pages that are doing well, and then describe to me the types of pages that aren't doing well, things like that. And that's a godsend from a consulting perspective. And there's so many different ways to do something like that. This is also another example I'm not going to go into too deep, but you can have advanced data analytics make visualizations, which is also another hugely useful use case for advanced data analytics that used to be known as code interpreter, if you hear that out there. And then within Microsoft, you'll be able to do the same thing, because Microsoft's Copilot is based on similar technology. One story I want to tell quickly is we had a client that sold wool products that lost a lot of traffic. And what I was able to do was to go into Search Console and basically bring up one of their comparison reports. So give me the impressions and clicks this month compared to a month ago before they lost traffic, and then give that to advanced data analytics. And once again, similar to the example I gave before, I asked them, well, what types of keywords lost traffic? What types of keywords did not lose traffic? And for this particular client, what I found like super interesting was it just gave me the answer. It said they sell wool products and they do really well for wool insulation, and they still do well for wool insulation, but they used to get a lot of traffic for these keywords related to van life, which is living out of your van. And it turns out people who live out of their van like to buy wool to insulate their van, and they were getting a ton of traffic for that until they weren't. And that was basically the theme, the topic area that Google killed them for. And yes, I could have figured that out by eyeballing the data myself, but I mean, why not spend 60 seconds to just ask the AI to figure that out for me? So getting into try this at home, I really encourage you guys to start pulling spreadsheets from tools. Like I use mint.com for my personal finance. And over the weekend, I pulled like all of my data, 10 years worth of data out of mint.com, and I gave it to ChatGPT Plus, which maybe I'll regret. I don't know how they're going to use the data. And I just asked it, how can you help me with this sheet? And it gave me some really useful ideas. I learned how much for example, it told me that, Dale, 10 years ago, when you went to a restaurant, you spent an average of $40. Now, when you go to a restaurant, you spend an average of $150. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Why is that? Is it the same restaurants or is it new restaurants? And then it said, well, here's some restaurants you still go to, and yes, you're spending an average and you're spending about 30% more at these restaurants, but there's these new restaurants that are higher priced that you didn't used to go to. And I'm like, holy crap, that it can get deep. So large language models, as I said, are more useful than you think. First, we'll go into, I guess, some of the downside here, but I always like to show this. This is my dog, Ginger. She's a wonderful creature. I can't stand her, just to be honest, but she's super cute. Why I have to tell the story. One day, like I came downstairs and I noticed that she had taken her wet dog food and like dragged it all over. And I was quite annoyed at this dog. But my wife came down, she was pissed off too, and I said, but don't worry, I'm going to take care of it. So I was like trying to scrape it up. I couldn't get it out of the carpet. I realized that I needed a machine that was purpose built to clean up after this mud. So what I did was I basically turned to my fancy AI home appliance that I call Alexa, and I said, Alexa, so I said, Alexa, order a wet vac, like that. And what was cool about it was she's like, yeah, no problem, we'll do it. What I noticed, or what came the following day, was not exactly what I expected, but I ended up with 8 wet vacs on my doorstep here. And this is really, my house is really the wet vacs. What I realized was that order a wet vac sounds a lot like Alexa, order 8 wet vacs. So I ended up with way more than I needed. My wife was embarrassed. I thought she would be upset because we had to figure out how to return these things, but she was actually upset because she thought our neighbors were going to think that our family was so dirty that we actually needed these web vacs. And I'm going to get back to AI here in a second. But when I did try to return them, I realized I wasn't the only one having a bad day. This guy was also having a bad, because he couldn't figure out how to process the return. It took a half hour, kind of pissed me off. But anyway, when we're thinking about large language models, there are a number of issues, kind of like the issue that I had with Alexa. They don't always work. Sometimes the output is inaccurate. You have to check everything. Like, we never use, my agency, I mean, we're all over this stuff, but we never use it in a way where it's outputting something and we just throw it into the world. It's always helping us with ideation, or creating the first draft of something. And then we have humans go in there and add their piece to it. They still haven't figured out how to compensate artists. They're training on prompting can be difficult, which is why I'm excited about new interfaces. And then there are privacy concerns. I just told you guys that I gave OpenAI all of my personal finance data over the weekend without really thinking about it. And we'll see how that comes back to haunt. Now, where do you start? And what I love about this is a survey that Jasper.ai did, and they're looking at their customers, asking them, how are you guys using generative AI? Where are you getting the most benefits? And what turned out, there's more to this report, but what it turned out was that most people were getting the most bang for the buck using AI to refresh, repurpose, or update existing content, not creating new content. Not that it can't be helpful with creating new content, it's just that's not where the bang for the buck is. So you could imagine writing prompts where you have an article. Well, what I usually do is take a look at your website, what pages are performing the best, because you want to start with your top performing pages. And then you can ask ChatGPT to take a look at the page, the information on the page. And then also look at the information on the other pages that are appearing in the top results for the keywords that you care about, and give you the gap, like what themes are missing, what information is missing. Another thing that I'm doing is I'm using some prompts that I wrote to take a look at pages that are performing well on my website. And I ask ChatGPT, what questions does this content answer? And then I also ask it to give me the answers to those questions, and then I have to massage that because they're never perfect. And then I'll put that Q&A at the bottom of the page. And what that does is it like expands the amount of information that Google is seeing, and then it also allows me to show up for more like featured snippets and all that good stuff. But it's just another way that I'm using AI to improve pages. Now, for you guys, in terms of where you start, like think about your process. This is a process for creating content. I highlighted writing an outline, writing the first draft, and then doing research, because these might be three areas where you think AI tools of some sort could help you. But just take a look at your process, and really what you're going to realize once you get started with AI tools is that your process is going to change. And I think that's really interesting. Like, instead of just plugging AI in for different pieces, which is where you'll start and where you should start, you'll realize, like for me, I used to do my own ideation on paper when I'm trying to figure out what I should write about. Then I would write like a rough outline. Then I would try to fill it in with an article or a thought leadership piece or an email or something like that. Now my process is like completely different because I have AI tools and I talk for a living. I do a lot of sessions like this. So what I do is I record everything that I do, sales calls or sessions like this, and then I give them to a tool that will transcribe them. And then I have like 20 prompts that I run against them that will extract content. So instead of my content process looking something like this I'm showing now that you guys might all be familiar with, my personal content content development process begins with a starter that was generated by AI based on something that I said on a call or at an event or on stage. And what I love about that is I get those content starters like immediately after I speak, so the stuff is still fresh in my mind, and I'm still excited about it. The other thing that's awesome is that the ideas that the large language model is generating for me for the content that I write are coming from my mouth. They're not coming from some random average of what it found on the web. So another thing to think about. And then I also want to highlight this. This is, I'll just quickly talk about this. This is a study that MIT did back in March. And it's interesting because what they did was they took several hundred professionals, people who work in an office, who do things like email and write reports and the kind of stuff we probably do on this call. And what they did was they trained half of them on how to use ChatGPT, and the other half were not allowed to use ChatGPT. And what they did was they measured the time it took for them to get these professional tasks done, and they measured the quality of the professional tasks. And it's interesting what they found. They found that the people who had ChatGPT did better in terms of quality and got the work done in less time, which is what we would expect. But what's really interesting about this is how they were able to save time. They saved time because they spent less time researching and less time writing. They actually spent more time editing. And what this means, I mean, for me, and is it just helps to understand like how people are getting the time benefits from using AI. Now, I have a writer, I'll tell you a quick story. I have a writer that I talked to earlier this year, and he called me and said, hey, Dale, I'm thinking about telling all of my clients like you to cut my rates in half. And I said, what are you smoking? First of all, send me some, but you want me to pay you half as much going forward? And he said, yes, Dale. And I said, why? And he said, because I'm using a number of AI tools and I'm 4 times as productive as I was before. So I think if I can go to all my clients and cut my rates in half, I'll get more work than I had last year, and I'll make more than double the money that I made last year. And I was like, holy crap. So he's the way that people like him are getting that level of efficiency and productivity boost out of the AI tools is by using by changing their process, similar to the way that I changed my process when I'm writing my thought leadership content. So when you're using ChatGPT for content, like I found it best to use it for generating ideas, doing research. And when I say doing research, you can ask it what it thinks about a topic, but really what I want to do is I want to give it some publications or an ebook, something online that I trust, and then ask it questions based on something that I trust, rather than just asking straight up ChatGPT, because it might be wrong, or it's more likely to be wrong and hallucinate if I don't give it something I trust to answer it from. I do use it to write article outlines, generate questions for Q&A. I will have it answer questions, but when I have it answer a question for Q&A, I give it a transcript of something that I did, so that it's answering from words coming out of my mouth. And I'm going to move on here. Here's another thing you should try. Oh, this QR code. If you guys want my slides, if you don't get them, you can grab this QR code or my email address, dale@fireandspark.com. I have more to go here, but I'm always put this in here so you guys can easily grab my slides and you know where to get them. Dale@fireandspark.com. So prompting strategies. For those of you who are using ChatGPT or any other large language model, you might be writing prompts and wondering how to write prompts. It helps to really think about the layered prompt approach, and I'm not the only one doing this, but everybody has their own kind of take on it. The first thing to think about is to give ChatGPT a role, and that's important because if I have it writing for my website or my SEO agency, I'll tell it like, you're an SEO specialist and a copywriter, and you're going to be helping me write copy for my website. And what that does in the large language model is activate everything the large language model learned about those roles. Everything it learned about SEO, everything it learned about being a copywriter, everything it learned about writing for websites. So giving it that role is important. Then you'll give it a task like, I'm going to ask you to write product descriptions, and I'll give you the product details. Then a style guide, and I give it like bullet point style guides, and I'll show you an example, but it might be something like employ vivid imagery in your copy. And then the last is I like to give it examples. Examples are absolutely huge. If you're asking to write titles for articles or outlines, give it examples of outlines that you like, or article titles or article topics that you like, and you'll get much better results. Now, here's an example of a prompt. The first thing I'm doing is giving it a role. I'm saying, you're a content writer for a website that offers price comparison and for furniture and home decor. So there's a lot in that role that's activating its knowledge, it's learning all the patterns that it learned when it was trained. Then from there, I'm saying your job is to write website copy about tips and tricks for a better home. And I won't go through all this, but here's our demographic. We want you to write about products and categories. We want you to write 100 words or less. Then from there, giving it a style guide. So we might say, use a lighthearted and friendly tone with casual language to create a welcoming atmosphere. And you might not have a bullet point style guide, but it's actually really easy to generate one. You can give ChatGPT a website or a URL or some copy and say, give me some bullet points that I could use as a style guide. And then you could revise it from there. That's how we got this. Then some examples, and the examples are huge. These examples were written by our human writer, and then from there we have 20,000 pages that we're having the AI help us to write content for. Now, what you can see, like I didn't actually give it a product to write about or give it a product category to write about. What I like to do when I'm done with one of these big prompts is I'll tell it, do you understand these instructions? Rather than telling it to actually generate any output. And the reason why I like to do that is because I'm checking the model. When I ask it, do you understand? It's going to give me a paragraph explaining the instructions. And I'm going to read through that and say, okay, do I think it understands what I'm asking it to do? And the first time I did that with this particular prompt, it said, you would like me to use humor and tell jokes in the product descriptions. And I said, no, I don't want you to tell jokes, but yes, I want you to use humor. Now, do you understand? And it gave me back an understanding that I was cool with. And I said, okay, great. Now I have a prompt that works and I can give it product descriptions and have it start doing writing. Another try this is to give it some copy, maybe copy you've written or a website that you like, and ask it to describe the author's voice and create a style guide in bullet point form. And you can start to create a style guide that you can use when you're prompting. Now, some other points here when you're using ChatGPT or another large language model, you want to be specific. And I already showed you guys a prompt for generating SEO title tags. But in this case, I'm telling it, write an SEO meta title for an ergonomic chair using these keywords in 55 characters or less. Then add the business name at the end of the title. And our business name does not count towards the 55 character limit. So I'm just being very specific. And you can imagine building a spreadsheet with a prompt like this that would generate a lot of title tags or something like that. Then I already talked about giving ChatGPT a role, but I just want to give some more examples. You're a personal finance expert, you're a nutritionist, you're a career counselor, like you can go nuts with this. But it's important to really think about that up front to activate those patterns and that knowledge that it learned. And then using examples is huge. One of the reasons is because you're more likely to get what you want or in the style that you want. But another way to think about it is like these large language models are really good at predicting the next word, just kind of keep going. So one style of prompt that works well is to tell it what you want it to do and then give it start a list and tell it to complete the list, because it'll read in that list and then just keep going and you get better results possibly that way. And then using delimiters, this is an example where I have a prompt where I'm asking it to generate an article outline and I'm giving it examples of topic outline at the bottom of the prompt. I'm using delimiters. Delimiters are basically things that don't normally show up in text to mark the beginning and the end of the topic and the beginning and the end of the outline. And you can see how this is helpful for the beginning and the end of the outline, because I want to separate the beginning and I want to separate that outline from the rest of the prompt. And I want the large language model to know where it stops. And I've already talked about style guides. So this is another try this, which is to generate some questions that dog owners would ask. One permutation of this that I really like that I use is to, if let's say you're writing about, for like my client that's in the pet space and you want to write for dog owners, you can ask, and this is what I do, ask ChatGPT to give you 2 experts in the pet space that write about dog training online. And then I would verify to make sure they really are experts and ChatGPT didn't just make it up. Then I ask it to write about something I know is controversial, like static correction. Static correction is when you put a collar on a dog that might shock the dog if they like go astray or something, or get too close to the fence. And I'll tell it to basically write a debate between these two experts on this topic and make sure to dig deep with questions in the areas where they disagree on this topic. And what I love about that is it's a great way to ideate information for an article that you're writing, if you happen to be writing an article about dog training and static correction and all that sort of thing. And I didn't come up with that idea. I got it out of the book, but I don't remember which one. So I'm going to go in quickly here into some more examples of using ChatGPT for SEO, like generating metadata, writing redirect rules. I can never remember like the .htaccess file way of doing that. Clustering keywords and classifying keywords. I do a lot of that. We'll classify keywords based on themes we care about or types of keywords. And then we'll cluster keywords when we have a long list just to understand which are related to each other, and we can start to understand the themes. Now, here's another example, which is I had some paid data. I was doing SEO, but I had some data from a Google Ads account. And what the data was keyword and then the number of conversions they got from that keyword. Some of the keywords had 0 conversions and some of them had a lot of conversions. So I gave all of that data to ChatGPT and I said, based on this conversion data for these keywords, make up new keywords that are not on this list that you think would convert. And it gave me, like you see here, refinance mortgage rates, home loan interest rates, just a whole long list of keywords that were not already in this account that it thinks would convert based on the conversion data. Then for keyword research, what I'm doing here is taking some Search Console data and once again, asking ChatGPT, how can you help me to analyze this search data? And in this case, this is a website that has 100 million pages that we worked on. So there were definitely some patterns in here that it helped me find in terms of keywords, like what's ranking, what's not ranking, all of that I never would have been able to figure out just eyeballing it on my own. Now, this is a page that we created. It's just a landing page, but we have some AI prompts that will generate each individual piece of this. So I do not recommend generating long form content or blog articles with ChatGPT, but if you need to generate like one, you can create one prompt for each individual section and then kind of rinse and repeat, because you might have a landing page for each industry that you go after or something like that. We've been able to build out one template and then in this case 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different prompts and have it generate the different sections of the website. And remember, we always have a human come in and revise and check and make sure everything looks okay. But this is a big time savings. And then I did talk about GPT for Sheets. This is another thing that we use a lot. It gives you a function in Google Sheets that is the GPT function. And what you can do is you can build a prompt in the sheet and then have the GPT function execute the prompt and put the result, the output from ChatGPT in the spreadsheet. So that's a really useful use case, especially if you want to generate a lot of metadata or something like that. But on the next slide, I'll show you how I've been using it. I call these prompting sheets because there's sheets that have prompts in them. But what I use this one for is, let's say I run an SEO agency, so I sell SEO services. So imagine I'm on the phone with somebody, or I'm about to get on the phone with somebody, and they might be a company that's targeting construction companies that are looking to hire people in the trades. In this case, what it was a site that had a bunch of job listings for plumbers, carpenters, people in the trades. So I answer these 4 questions about the company I'm about to get on the phone with. And this is just showing the top of the sheet. There's a lot more in the sheet. But what it'll do is it'll construct a prompt in this cell. You're an SEO expert building a content strategy. And then it'll run that prompt and put the output in column C, which is a bunch of creative content ideas of a particular type, niche collection pages. But in this spreadsheet, there are also blog article ideas or buying guide ideas or lead magnet ideas. So just based on and when I change these, the ideas in column C automatically change. because it just reruns all of the prompts. So you can imagine how useful this is, because every time I'm working on a new project or talking to a new sales prospect, I can update these 4 and I get a whole spreadsheet worth of ideas automatically. So I believe this is my last slide of the presentation. But this is to write an SEO meta title for the following article. Yes, that's what this is. So any questions? We went through this super fast because we have an hour here. But any questions from anybody?
Anybody have questions for Dale?
I had a question. You talk about using AI tools for analyzing like a spreadsheet. I guess I had 2 questions, but the first question would be like, is there any data cleaning that you found you need to do, or can you kind of just give it a messy spreadsheet and it can figure it out on its own? And then
you always have to think about data cleaning. But I always give it the raw, and then I have a conversation with advanced data analytics about what data cleaning we should do. It's incredibly good at suggesting outliers that you might need to remove, or like stuff like that.
Okay, cool. And then I guess I'm just curious if you speak a little bit more about like how much accuracy we should expect when saying, like, if I'm thinking of like, if I have like web analytics data, I want to see like what's the change over time in visits, and you mentioned you kind of both that this can be good for summarizing trends, but also that like you want to have a human check everything and it can't do math. So like, how do you kind of think about that combination of like things?
Well, it's tough because a large language model is not 100% accurate. It's going to make things up. But when you're using advanced data analytics, you're actually using Google to write Python code, and now all of a sudden it can do computation as long as it gets the Python code right. So yes, it can get it right, but you still need to check and make sure it's doing what you think it's doing.
Cool. Thanks for clarifying.
Hey Dale, thanks for covering all that. Have you done any testing on the output of the content versus, I know it's faster, but as far as Google actually picking up the content faster or being more effective with click-throughs?
It's really tough so I get that question a lot, but we really have to distinguish between 2 things. Like sometimes when people say, is AI generated content, like does it rank in Google? Sometimes what they mean is push button, 100% automated, no human involvement content. And if that's what you're doing, like what we've seen is you can get a bump and that content can rank, but Google, because it's not that great, Google's doing a good job recognizing that it's relatively low quality. But it depends on how you generate it. There are ways that you can generate it from really solid information and maybe get it to be like ranked on a long-term basis. But what people I work with are really doing with AI is they're using it to help them create content, not to just write content in an automated fashion. And if you're using AI to write content in a way that makes the content better, there's no reason for Google to penalize it. And Google, they don't see a reason to penalize it either. So Ben, I'm trying to get, and feel free to unmute yourself and clarify, but there's really 2 different answers there. Like there's an answer for the people who think that they can just generate 100% automated content and walk away and retire on a beach. But then there's a different answer for people who are trying to figure out the right way for them and their content development process to include these tools into their workflow.
Yeah, no, I think you're definitely hitting on it. It's more of how do we get out of this hype cycle, where the writers need to be paid less, when in reality it's their experience and what they know is good copy to be put out there.
Yeah, and one thing I'll tell you is like we've been very, very deep into AI at my agency, and we've hired more writers in the last year, not less. And it's because AI allows us to generate more content and better content that's useful, just more than we could in the past. So we're really leaning into it, and we're leaning into it by experimenting with tools, paying for tools, but also paying for writers.
Well, I really, really appreciate this. I think it was very timely. Thank you so much, Dale. And I want to remind everybody about the talks that are coming coming up next. December 15th, we'll be welcoming Johnny Lungden. January 12th, Craig Sullivan and Oliver Patton. January 26th, we will be welcoming Aaron Weigel, and then another SEO talk on February 9th with Will Critchlow. So thank you so much, Dale. It was wonderful. I'm sure everybody would love your slides. Thank you for providing that. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.